Good morning, everyone. Today is May 15. My name is Natalie Fanny Gonzalez. I'm the County Council President. We are convening today to wrap up our work on the FY27 Operating Budget and Capital Improvements Program. Councilmember Dawn Lukey is attending virtually. If you can please make sure that we can see her, I'll appreciate it in one of the screens. There you go. Perfect. Everybody's here. I would like to start by saying that this has been a very emotional budget for many reasons, and we'll get through that later on. I told my colleagues I am not going to hold a vote unless every single person here is ready to vote. Okay? Yesterday, there were changes, and we ended up not holding the session because I needed everybody here to be sure that they were ready to vote. That's my job as the council president, to ensure that every single person of the county council feels that they have the information they need to make a good judgment based on what we have in front of us. So changes happen, and at the very last minute, I had to postpone the meeting. And I know many of you were here, and I love that you were here yesterday. I love that you're here today, because this is how Montgomery County in action. So I do apologize that people took a day off to be here and expected something and didn't happen. But I also need you to understand the process that we have here. And I did put Friday as a backup, which I didn't think we were gonna use it. We ended up using it. But I understand the frustration that people had because they were expecting something to happen yesterday. It did not happen. But it's best to have patience and wait until every single person is ready to make such an important and significant vote. So I wanted to say that to you. Believe me, I wish everything was done yesterday. Folks were not ready, and it's okay. We have time. So we're here today, and we're going to move forward. With that, the second thing that I want to say, again, this is a very emotional budget for many reasons, because of what's happening at the federal level, because of the proposal that we have from the county executive that we had to completely change, because there's so many moving pieces around that affect so many departments across the county. And many of us, we're 11 people with very different views. And getting to a consensus of 8, it's not a consensus of 6, it's a consensus of 8. It's hard, it's challenging, and my job is to bring that consensus and give people time. So I'm gonna please ask you, as we start this session right now, to not clap, to not boo, to not interrupt, because it doesn't make things easier. If you like something, you can go like this, and I'm being very consistent with the way I have run sessions since I became council president. If you have followed any of the public hearings, you know well that I have not allowed any boos or clapping or any of that, because it's disruptive, especially understanding that we have different views here on the council. So please, let's work together and not interrupt the process. So I trust that you can please work with me on that. With that, the first item on the agenda is one that is exciting for me. And it's the introduction and action on a resolution to approve the WSSC Water and System Development Charge. Is there a motion to suspend Rule 7D of a Rules of Procedure to allow for the introduction and action of this item?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Katz. Can I get a second? Second by Council Vice President Balcom. Those in favor, please raise your hand. And it passed unanimously. Now, is there a motion to approve WSSC Water System Development Charge? Moved by Council Member Evan Glass, second by Council Member Sidney Katz. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And it passed unanimously. Item 2 on today's agenda is a work session on the FY27 operating budget and FY27-32 capital improvements program. The first item on the agenda is the capital budget wrap-up and CIP reconciliation. We're gonna take straw votes, but I'm gonna ask for, I'm looking at you, yeah, right now. Before we start with the council report, is there a motion?
Yes, Madam President. Thank you. I'd like to move that we remove $36 million in current revenue that the council had allocated to the CIP due to the income tax and ITOC decisions, and instead allocate that to the operating budget to fund 2 additional tranches for MCPS off the reconciliation list. This would leave $8 million of additional revenue in the CIP while providing $143.8 million in additional FY27 resources to the MCPS operating budget.
Second.
We have a motion on the table by Councilmember Wiljogondo, second by Councilmember Kirsten Mink. I'm gonna open it up for discussion, but first, can we have council staff have a presentation? And then if anybody wants to speak, please let me know. I'm gonna turn it to you, Mr. Keith.
Okay, good morning. Just based on the motion, there are 2 packets for today's meeting. One is the packet from yesterday, which was the initial reconciliation that was done at the $44 million assumption for the current revenue coming from the ITOC decision from last week. We also do have an addendum packet that presents the changes that would be needed from that reconciliation to get to the $8 million number, which you just heard in the motion. So we do have those 2 steps we'll talk about, but we want to talk about the main reconciliation first, where most of the changes are made. Then we'll talk about the adjustments after that. And just quick background, the council did hear on April 21st an update from staff regarding the CIP and in particular, the bond funding gap and the current revenue issues. And the packet does note that at the time we had a $417 million general obligation bond gap based on the council's approved spending affordability guidelines. So a very unusually high gap. We talked about it at the time and explained the reasons for that. Subsequent to that, we've had some additional puts and takes over the last few weeks, including some issues such as revising state aid assumptions. The council made further CIP recommendations. So we landed at a number not that much different, but we're down to about $400 million that we had to reconcile as of last week. So that was the 6-year number. We also have to reconcile by fiscal year as well. So it is a bit of a 3-dimensional puzzle we have to work out by funding source. On the general obligation bond side, you have the $400 million gap. On the current revenue side, we also had a gap. The executive made recommendations consistent with his operating budget assumptions in March to not fund certain elements in the agency CIPs or to revise elements of his own current revenue funded CIP. So that the packet also notes on page 2 that there was a current revenue gap that we had to address. And the gap focuses on appropriation for FY27. That's the money that's out the door with current revenue. And I've noted the projects that contributed to about an $11 million gap that we had to deal with. Not the $400 million, but a little bit of a different gap that required also some reconciliation. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Naimia, to walk us through the initial stages of the reconciliation process.
So you heard this on April 21st. Just to reiterate, in terms of our process of approaching reconciliation, staff looked at supporting previously approved CIP projects that are currently existing as of today, before we prioritizing those over new projects, for example. We also looked at supporting projects that are either under construction, are fully appropriated, or heading into construction next year, and keeping those on their approved schedules. We supported approving the 6-year funding for systemic level of effort projects, essentially not going below what their previously approved level of those projects were. However, increases in those projects in the executive's recommendation CIP would be revisited. We looked at supporting projects that leverage significant outside aid, federal aid, state aid, contributions, grants. And finally, we looked at supporting projects that the council and or the committees identified as their priorities, which we'll get into further in. In terms of the summary of our reconciliation, we initially took care of the current revenue gap of $11.2 million through funding switches, technical adjustments, and additional resources from ITOC. And then the GO bond gap of $400 million we addressed by deferring schedules out of the 6-year period, essentially moving funds out and delaying some projects. We looked at reducing funding levels for certain projects as well in the systemic project category, primarily in MCPS and DOT, as well as a little bit in park and planning. And finally, we maintained the council's adopted SAG level of $1.8 billion over the 6-year period, or $300 million per year, as well as the $54 million over the 6-year period for park and planning bonds as well. So those have been maintained in this scenario. And finally, expenditures were reduced and delayed or adjusted by year through a combination of production delays and technical adjustments. These technical adjustments assisted us with reconciliation significantly, but I will note that these adjustments do not affect the schedule, scope, or timing of projects. They are simply moving dollars around while keeping that whole. Other than that, after the council's review was completed on May 7th, we also incorporated the additional ITALC money through the scenarios we'll discuss in various ways. So with that, I'll turn it back to Keith to talk about the specific agency CIP categories and what changed in those projects.
Yeah, and as we've discussed in the packet, when we're dealing with a significant reconciliation issue, as we are every year, the MCPS CIP, which is about 30% of the approved CIP, has to be revisited. It's also reflective of the increase that that MCPS requested this year in their CIP, which was unprecedented as well, and the executive's recommendation to support a significant amount of that. So we knew in our reconciliation we would have to revisit the MCPS projects. With that in mind, we tried to keep the priorities that we discussed earlier that had been expressed by the council. In particular with MCPS, we focused on trying to keep Damascus High School and Eastern Middle School major capital projects on their schedules. They had significant cost increases reflected in the 6-year period, and they have very large amounts of construction in the middle of the CIP. So that was foundational to the reconciliation, trying to keep those projects whole in the middle of the CIP. So that left us having to look for other significant adjustments in the MCPS CIP. And what that would be is other significant individual school projects, in this case, elementary school major capital projects. And there were 4 of those that we looked at. They had been initially recommended for deferral by MCPS as part of their non-recommended reductions and pushed back a bit. In the reconciliation, we have to push them back further to have basically all of their construction beyond 6 years. They have design starting in 31 and 32, but their construction schedules had to be pushed beyond 6 years. And those 4 projects are listed on page 4 of the packet. They include Piney Branch Elementary School, Cold Spring Elementary School, Burning Tree Elementary School, and Highland View Elementary School. So the reconciliation basically puts them together in sync at the end of the CIP, basically, with their construction beyond 6 years. And that element alone reduced the bond gap by about $155 million. The other area we looked were the systemic projects in the MCPS CIP. In particular, MCPS had requested significant increases in their HVAC replacement, roof replacement, and their outdoor play space and athletic infrastructure projects. And those 3 projects, what we attempted to do there was, as they are important level of effort projects and we're trying to fund those at approved levels, we looked at how much of the increase we could afford in those and try to keep the increases that we could do at least through the first few years of the CIP. And what we were able to do, based on adjustments elsewhere in the CIP, we were able to accommodate the first 4 years of those increases for those 3 projects in the CIP based on what MCPS had requested. Now that will change, as we'll note, in the second reconciliation scenario we'll be talking about, but for purposes of this initial reconciliation, we were able to accommodate the increases in the first 4 years and some increase in the last 2, not as high as what MCPS had requested. We also made a year-to-year adjustment in the alternative education programs project. This was a new project requested by MCPS to relocate some of its facilities. Because of the issues we had with the middle of the CIP fiscal gap, we did pushed that project out 2 years. That also does give MCPS time to revisit where these facilities might go. There's a lot of activity going on in the CIP and a lot of issues with elementary school boundaries and so forth. So it does provide them some additional time to consider that planning for that project. Another project we looked at was the school security systems project. This was part of the revenue gap I mentioned earlier. The executive had not recommended any local funding in FY27 for this project. We assumed to fund it at the proposed level in this initial reconciliation, which is $6.5 million, and that's claiming a portion of the $44 million in ITOC that we mentioned earlier. And then the facility planning project, there are some bond-funded reductions in the last 4 years that were taken in the reconciliation, but also on the current revenue side, we included $2.5 million for a countywide a countywide space study that MCPS had requested in this project. That would also be funded with some additional ITOC money in this initial reconciliation. And we'll talk about how that changes in the next reconciliation as well. So those are the major changes that we had to make to the MCPS CIP. So summarizing, Eastern Middle School, Damascus High School would remain on schedule. The 4 major capital project elementary schools would be pushed out. We increased the systemic projects funding to the level that MCPS wanted in its first 4 years, had to make some reductions in the last 2 years, and then funded the school security systems project in 27 and the facility planning study in 27 and 28. So I'll turn it back to Mr. Mia here for the balance of the CIP.
Okay. The county government represents over half the CIP, so we also looked at that category as well. Transportation projects alone count for another 1/3 of the CIP, so almost on par with MCPS. So in terms of affordability delays, schedule changes that we made, we pushed out the start of construction for Chevy Chase Library and Redevelopment from FY29 to FY30, a one-year delay in construction. The recreation facilities refurbishment outdoor pools project, the start of that project has been delayed also 1 year from FY28 to FY29. The Burnt Hill Road Bridge, which is a new bridge project in this year's CIP, the start of that has been deferred from FY28 to FY30, so a 2-year delay with that project. And finally, Summit Avenue Extension, the start of that project has been deferred from FY30 to FY31, so a 1-year delay. We also looked at adjustments to the bond funding levels for several DOT level of effort projects, namely permanent patching, residential and rural road rehabilitation, resurfacing and resurfacing residential rural roads, as well as a recreation level of effort for refurbishment of centers. We reduced those funding levels year by year, but overall in this initial reconciliation, they were getting 7 to 85% of what the requested funding levels were. So lower level of increase than requested, but still an increase over the base budget. Finally, there were production delays we recognized, the largest one being Observation Drive, where $30 million of construction was moved from FY32 to the beyond, which helped close that $400 million gap significantly. The Boys Transit Center shifted some dollars from FY27 to 28, just reflecting the latest schedule of development for that project. And the Brink Road Bridge, the start of that project was delayed by 1 year, based again on the current schedule that DOT provided us. We also made technical adjustments, again, that don't affect scope, schedule, or funding levels for the North Bethesda Fire Station, Justice Center, Clarksburg Library, and Institute for Health Computing, which is a new project for this year. And that one had a funding switch. And finally, the scenario, we were able to accommodate $300,000 of current revenue for the Outdoor Firearms Training Center project to begin design FY27. So altogether, those deferrals and reductions accounted for another $137 million of the $400 million 6-year gap. With respect to college's CIP, college had a number of changes that the council had reviewed already, including scope reductions for Germantown Student Services Center and other changes. So the only change we made to to the college's CIP was the Rockville Theater Arts building renovation. We made a technical adjustment to shift construction dollars within the 6-year period. We also programmed a modest $150,000 so this project could qualify for its 50-50 match with state aid. So that's been programmed as well. And otherwise, we also accommodated the undesignated current revenue reduction that the executive made in FY27 for the Information Technology College project. That was a $3.6 million current revenue allocation that we were able to restore with funding switches for 27. Finally, Parks CIP. Parks has a very modest amount of GO bonds, so the changes are very minimal. We revised the energy conservation, non-local parks. planned life cycle asset replacement for non-local parks, and the trails, natural surface, and resource-based recreation projects. Each of these received a lower level of increase than requested, but at least half of what they've requested, and which is higher than the current CIP. So they are getting an increase, but a lower level as requested. We also had funding switches, restoring the executive's undesignated current revenue for park and planning of $800,000. And finally, the reconciliation recognizes a new project for this year's CIP, the Johnson's Local Park, which is receiving about $1 million of state aid in FY27. So that will be part of the final council action as well. The parks category contributed about $3.6 million in GO bond savings over the 6-year period. Again, as I noted before, the spending affordability guidelines, this reconciliation assumes that the council's approved SAG is maintained, $300 million per year, or $1.8 billion over the 6-year period, as well as the park and planning's SAG as well, of $50 million over the 6-year period, or $9 million per year. And finally, there's a chart on page 8 of the packet that categorizes all of these changes by production delay, technical adjustment, deferrals and reductions, and undesignated reductions. Again, these lists of projects are the full scope of the changes we made in this initial reconciliation. Okay, turn it over to Mr. Levchenko to walk you through the addendum packet next.
Right. So that baseline got us to a level of a balance based on that $400 million gap, but also assuming the $44 million in ITOC. With the addendum packet, we note what would need to be done in order to bring the ITOC contribution to the CIP down to $8 million. So it's a $36 million change in current revenue for these projects. And the first page of the packet, we have a slide for this as well that we're putting up. And bear with me, it's got a lot of numbers on it. This shows the school projects and how they're affected by ITOC at the $44 million and how they'd be affected at the $8 million amount. And then the other changes that happen or that we include in the reconciliation, and we'll get into that. So just looking at the 3 projects I mentioned earlier, HVAC, roofs, and outdoor play space, in the initial ITOC amounts you had $20.7 million for HVAC, you had $5 million allocated for roof replacement, and you had $9.3 million for outdoor play space. Under the ITOC at $8 million, only the HVAC project is able to still have some ITOC money in it, and that I'll mention that's at the $5.3 million, and that's because in the reconciliation we allocated some money to the school security systems project to try to keep some amount in that project, a little less than what was in the reconciliation. However, that's not where the changes stop. Once you've reduced HVAC and roofs, for instance, with local spending, you also have to reduce the assumed state aid for those projects. It's a 50-50 match assumption, and we have historically gotten pretty close to the 50%. So we also have to reflect reductions in state aid for those projects. Now, in order to soften that blow a bit, we did try to identify additional bond savings outside of the school CIP, and we did look at some of those DOT projects again that Mr. Mia mentioned earlier, and identified another $7 million in those that we then allocated back to MCPS. So the HVAC project, we found another $2.7 million, and what that enabled us to do was to make the HVAC project consistent with MCPS's proposal for the first 2 years of the CIP. We were able to get it through 2 years. You remember earlier in the earlier reconciliation, we were able to be up to 4 years with that. And then similar with roofs, we added $3 million back in that project, and we're able to fund the proposed request for the first 2 years, but make adjustments beyond that period. And then we also allocated some of the additional money that we found in bonds to the school security systems project, so that we could have a $4 million amount in that project. Previously, it was at 6.5, so it's not as high as what MCPS requested, but it is an amount that would allow them to move forward with some work in FY27. What had to be removed in this scenario was the $2.5 million for the study in facility planning for the countywide space study that MCPS would like to do, and that work will need to be done. But we'll just have to revisit that issue either additional resources can be found elsewhere or revisited as part of next year's amended CIP process or the full CIP in 2 years. So the totals at the bottom of this show the net impact. You can see the ITOC money goes from 44 to 8, and the state aid the GEO bonds added softens that a bit. There's $7 million added there, but we did lose about $14.7 million in projected state aid. So those numbers balance out across all those different funding sources. So the 6-year impact on those projects is about a $43.7 million impact reduction, counting the state aid, counting the bonds, and counting the ITOC reduction. Now, we did want to note a little more in more detail what's happening to the DOT projects that contributed the additional $7 million.
Sure. So the additional $7 million that we reallocated to schools' level of effort were all slight reductions made in FY29 for the 4 resurfacing projects. It was about $1 million each in permanent patching, residential rural road rehabilitation, and resurfacing primary arterial, and a $4 million reduction in resurfacing residential rural roads in FY29. And so those were straight reductions and then reallocations to schools in the same years. And finally, we did make one. I'll note that there will be a $8.2 million supplemental appropriation in FY26 for residential resurfacing. That'll be introduced next week, May 21st. So that'll accelerate some funding in 26 to do some work by using the set aside and other funding switches. Finally, I'll note there was a technical adjustment made to the Wheaton Arts and Cultural Center in this second reconciliation. Again, does not affect scope, schedule, or timing. It just simply moves some $1.3 million around the 6-year period. And so the updated chart on the bottom, starting on the bottom of page 3, is essentially the same chart with just Wheaton added, because that's the only new change we made in terms of the universe of projects we adjusted.
So once again, if you make all those changes, as we talked about under the first reconciliation, then the CIP would be balanced across GEO bonds, park and planning bonds, current revenue. We would still have a reasonable set aside of GEO bond space available for future years, as we talked about in past CIP discussions, now at that $8 million ITOC level. So I'll turn it back to the Council President.
Thank you. And I'll bring up the rear here with only 2 more slides, but much briefer than that presentation. The Council President did request that Council staff also look at the macro in the fiscal 27, 28, and 29 operating budget based on the motion that's on the table. So we will revisit a table we have seen multiple times, so Groundhog Day. What we're seeing here are the projected income tax revenues from the Council's progressive income tax rates compared to the 3.2% income tax rate that had been flat. And as we have for the millions watching at home, we also have the $24.4 million that we needed to back out from the county executive's increase to 3.3%. And so this again is just showing you that the progressive income tax rate structure yields about $105 million less over the 3-year period due to the way that progressivity works. And again, for those again watching at home that might not have heard the first time, it takes 3 fiscal years for the income taxes to fully filter in. So as discussed, we've balanced that, or the Council balanced that using the ITOC. And we've been talking about how the ITOC, the income tax offset credit, has been working in the CIP. It also was doing some work in the operating budget. And we'll probably do some more work in the operating budget based on the motion. And so we see that we had a $77.8 million surplus in 27. However, that goes down to $33.8 million once the income tax rates fully phase in. So starting there as the base, the 77.8 and 27, if you use we need to get back to the 33.8 remainder, we only had $44 million of one-time resources. That's why the $44 million in 27 was being used in the CIP, because it's one-time resources. As you can see, once we get to fiscal 29, that 33.8 is gone, and therefore that 44 is gone. So what does that mean for future fiscal years? Just like any budget, we will continue to have a structural deficit with this decision based on the one-time going to ongoing, and that will be coming in 28 and 29. And so that is just, again, as the Council President requested us to have full transparency what this decision is before the Council. That is what we're looking at based on the decision to use $36 million worth of ITOC from the CIP. In addition to the impacts of the specific projects that my colleagues shared, it will also have a structural impact on the operating budget. And with that, we will turn it back to the Council President.
Thank you for the presentation. I needed everybody to understand this and know this on the record. With that, I see Councilmember Don't Look It, but first, before I go to you, I have Council Vice President Balcom, and then I'll turn it to you, okay? Go ahead.
Thank you. I want to thank staff for that presentation, and it shows just how complicated this is. So I will vote for this transfer from the CIP to the operating budget, but very reluctantly. An $8 billion budget is a complex puzzle to solve, and it's very important to remember that the $36 million that we're talking about would not even have been available if it weren't for the hard work of the GO Committee and Chair Kate Stewart. I want to thank her for her painstaking work that she and the committee did to find a more progressive tax solution with a reduction in income tax for our low wage workers and the elimination of the ITOC. The byproduct of that policy shift was a one-time $44 million pot of money, one-time pot of money for capital projects. It's also important to note that the vote for the new income tax structure was not unanimous, including those who today are eager to spend the money. The transfer of money from capital projects to operating budget is not as easy as it sounds. Mr. Smith just laid out the importance of what's happening here today. First, it takes money away from important capital projects, important MCPS capital projects, but it further exacerbates the structural deficit. And after weeks of discussions, I regret that this is the only viable option. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Councilmember Don Luque.
Thank you, Madam President. And I know this has been a very challenging time for all of the council members working through this. And I too want to thank our staff, our central staff, and thank you for constantly being able to update information and provide the latest to everyone as they make their decisions. I cannot support the motion to transfer the money out of the CIP and into the operating budget. I think, and our staff just gave a wonderful overview of it, and the charts don't lie, and the charts are very accurate. And I want to highlight some things that Council Vice President Balcom just said, because the vote on the ITOC and the progressive tax piece, which was inherently intertwined, was a close vote. And I did vote for that because I do believe in the progressivizing of the income tax. I think it is the right and responsible thing to do on behalf of our residents right now who are facing outstanding fiscal pressures, most of which are outside the control of this body. And while eliminating the ITAC was challenging and came with a lot of heartburn, it was necessary, paired with that progressivization, to make that happen, and would have yielded the $44 million for us to use on capital projects. The fact that we are now taking $36 million of that away, and at the same time sacrificing potentially just under $15 million in state aid for very necessary capital projects, many of which affect our schools, like HVAC, roof replacement, outdoor play space, is very disappointing. I think that there were trade-offs to be had, and I was okay with where we were, which is why I voted to support on the ITOC progressive income tax motion the other day. But it was with the understanding that one-time funds would be used for the one-time things, and that is not the motion that is before the body today, so I will not be supporting the motion. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Next, I have Councilmember Shebra Evans.
Sure. So I can thank the staff now, but I'm going to thank you later too. And as a seasoned council member, what I will say is that we were sent over a difficult budget to begin with. And as a member of the GO committee, I want to thank my committee members, particularly Councilmember Kate Stewart, for coming up with the money that I am going to fully support to be able to go to our school system, which is the flagship of our county. I just wanted to hop on to say that we had a difficult budget to begin with. I didn't know which direction we would end up with, and I respect all of my colleagues on here. We are 11 different individuals who are very committed and spirited and dedicated to this work. And so I respect each of you and your decisions that you make, but I know that at the end of the day, what I always have to do is make sure that I stand firm on my values and what's important to me. And so that's why I'm able to support this decision.
Thank you. Next, I have Councilmember Kate Stewart.
Thank you. Just want to also echo and thank everyone for their work, especially in the last day to get us to this point. First, I want to say I fully support and have been working really hard to find additional money for MCPS. Earlier this week, I voted for the $25 million in OPEB money to be used to fund the additional tranches. And that was one-time money. And as I think many of you sitting in here remember, I had the pleasure of sitting in the council presidency last year and figuring out how to fully fund the schools last year. And we used the OPEB money last year, and we're gonna have to do it again. I floated earlier this week the idea of a modest property tax increase to get us to where we need to be in the funding. I know that was a really tough ask this year, not just of my colleagues, but of members of the community. That idea did not move forward. And we need to get to a final budget. And we need to find the additional money for the schools. The action before us right now, as my colleagues have said, became an option because of the work we did in the GOAT committee on April 29th. But it wasn't just that meeting. I will say that one of the hardest things for me in the last year has been talking to parents and many of you about the conditions in the schools and in your facilities, about the mold, the asbestos, and other things. We all worked really hard to find the money to make sure that we could do as much as possible to do that, to fund HVAC, to fund the roof repair, to fund the security issues. And we had done that, but I know that there are those needs and then the urgent needs that are facing us on the operating side. So this is really hard. Because what we're doing is taking money from one part of our budget that was set aside for MCPS, and we're moving it to the other side. And I know from talking to many of you, especially MCA reps at New Hampshire Estates, and talking to Travis at SEIU folks about the administrative buildings, how much we need this money to go into infrastructure. So it's just really hard for me today to know that we're going to have to reduce this money, forego state aid, so that we could do this work. I very much appreciate the work of my colleagues. I understand why a property tax increase, even a 1.3 cent property tax increase, was taken off the table. But I'm very concerned about what we're doing with this action and what it means not just for the near term and what we can fund for infrastructure, but what it does for us long term. And so because of that, I ask for your grace today because I will not be voting for this motion. I will vote for the tranches. I will vote for the budget. But I need you to understand, it is not because I am not with you. It is just that I can't take this vote to take this money out of infrastructure right now. And I just ask for your grace on that today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Krista Mink.
This is not my preferred path to the level of MCPS operating funds that I joined Councilmember Jawando in setting as my minimum. Like colleagues, I would prefer not to use one-time funds for ongoing expenses. There have been other paths to this level of funding. In my opinion, I voted against this the income tax plan with the ITOC elimination. I don't think that we can afford to cut income taxes this year. I have wished that we were able to. The state gave us the ability to slightly raise income taxes for the wealthy. But when I saw that we were given that power, I was disappointed that it wasn't going to be enough to pay for a tax cut at the lower income levels, which I know is what many of us want to do. And I do disagree with paying for that by eliminating the ITOC, the income tax offset credit, which is why I voted against it. That said, before that tax package passed and after it, throughout this budget process, I have had a clear red line, which is that I'm not going to cut 40%, 70% of the MCPS operating budget. So to get my vote, we have to have a path to those dollars. And it might not be my preferred path, but we have to have a path. I've developed and shared alternative paths as well, including maintaining the ITOC and levying a much more nominal property tax increase, along with other options. You know, when it was clear that this was the income tax package that this body is going to move forward with, I also shared that this is an option that I am open to, and that's where we ended up. Again, not my preferred path, but we cannot let our difficult budget situation, we cannot let this fall so wildly disproportionately on our school system, on our staff, on our teachers, and ultimately on our students. So this does put us in a more difficult situation in the coming years. It was already difficult, but that's where we ended up. And I know some of us are already thinking about how we're going to remedy that. And in the meantime, we need our schools to remain places where our kids are able to learn.
Councilmember Lorian Sells.
Thank you to my colleagues and our staff for the multiple deliberations and analyses. I too want to thank the GO Committee. I did not vote for the elimination of the ITOC. I did not want to have to impact our residents with losing a tax rebate to pay for one-time services or to fill a budget gap. But when we see 70 million plus in proposed reductions to MCPS, almost 900 positions, I didn't see responsible budgeting. I saw consequences. I too see infrastructure. I see it in teachers who would have been removed from classrooms, in social workers pulled from students who desperately need our support. I see infrastructure in our special education services diminished. I see infrastructure as essential school staff, from paraeducators to HVAC technicians, being asked to carry out impossible burdens in a system already stretched too thin. I see infrastructure as human capital, not just brick and mortar. This was not fiscal prudence. This was harm. And I could not support balancing our budget on the backs of students, educators, and families. Superintendent Taylor's reduction scenarios made the stakes painfully clear. These are real people and real services that directly affect our children's ability to learn and succeed. MCPS requested a modest net increase of 84 positions, many of which were required by the blueprint. Instead, we're looking at cuts 10 times that size. I felt that was unreasonable. I wanted to talk about who would bear the greatest burden. Those who are already in the statistics: Black and brown students, students with disabilities, multilingual learners. Those cuts would jeopardize years of progress in literacy, career readiness, and closing long-standing now opportunity gaps. I could not support a budget that would move our county backwards. I also want to recognize the union leaders and advocates who have fought relentlessly, not just for their members, but for the integrity of our public institutions. To MCEA, SCIU Local 500, and the Montgomery County Association of Administrators and Principals, your advocacy has reminded us that budgets are moral documents. Behind every position is a person, behind every program is a child, and behind every vote is a responsibility to protect the people who make this county work. Your voices have made clear that there is an option, and it is a good option. I appreciate the analysis that are rearranging and postponing a few projects. And I am disappointed that we don't have more money going towards balancing our capital budget to meet the timelines that continue to bring discussions like this forth. None of the options were ideal, but if the alternative of laying off hundreds of educators and support staff, disrupting classrooms, weakening the very foundation of opportunity in this county, then we have to choose the less harmful path. Leadership requires uncomfortable decisions, and this is one of them. Dr. Taylor and school board members have told us our students are counting on us. And I want to thank everyone who has called, mailed, written letters, and shown up. Your presence has made more of an impact than you will ever know. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councilmember Sidney Katz.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm going to vote for this, even though I sincerely believe that this is a mistake. Councilmember Stewart is absolutely correct, but I believe we need to get to the end to approve a budget. I'm a member of the GO committee. I had those discussions with my colleague, Councilmember, the chair, Councilmember Stewart, and Councilmember Evans. I voted for ITALC when it was a 6-5 vote, and the people who voted against it now are telling us how that should be spent. That bothers me. Madam President, just so I understand how we're going to do this today, I have a much longer comprehensive statement. Do you want that now? You want that at the end?
No.
Well,
With all due respect, please don't. We're
that's
going to
why-
do the speeches after we vote on the operating budget.
and that's why I asked, Madam President, because we've had a lot of long speeches. I think we need to get past this. I think we need to actually vote on a budget. And I believe we need to understand that what is being done is not the brightest thing that we could do, but it is necessary. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you so much, and thank you for asking that question. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam President. In an effort to be brief on this point, I did not vote to eliminate the tax rebate, but that was a 6-5 vote, and I respect the will of this body, as I will continue to respect the will of the body today. I understand why that decision was made and extend my appreciation to the GO committee, because I hearken back to when I visited New Hampshire estates with some of you and some of your members. And when I went into the lower level, I immediately began experiencing respiratory problems. Seconds upon going into that classroom, I did not need to be told of what the problem was because I experienced it immediately. And so while I did not support changing of the ITOC, I understood it. That money is not going to go there now. And so all of the emails and concerns and the visits and the pull-asides and the texts and the phone calls, it's now not getting fixed. And so I understand where this money is going, and it is to support the operating budget. And I did speak with members of the school board and said, share some guidance with me. We only have a limited pool of money for all of these needs because no agency and no department in Montgomery County is getting fully funded this budget. So share with me what your priorities are, and the school board said that they preferred the operating budget. And so that's the motion that's on the table. I understand that too, but I do think it is putting us in a much tougher position moving forward. Not only using this one-time funds for that operating budget, but then also using the OPEB funds for one-time funding. There's a pattern that is disconcerting, and it's about the funding. And I appreciate the hard work of my colleagues, and I am just a little disappointed that the kids and the educators in New Hampshire estates and a number of other facilities will not get the help that they desperately asked for. We have to figure this out. We're clearly not figuring it out in this budget. I won't support the motion, and I'll end it there.
Thank you. Next, I have Councilmember Wojowondo.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I just wanted to say that this is not the ideal scenario for me either. But we are in the place of there's no good options here. There are worse options, and among them would be the devastating, catastrophic cuts to MCPS staff and educators. We cannot allow that. And there have been a lot of proposals over the course of this last year. And I made a proposal several months ago to increase our spending affordability guidelines, for example, so that we could borrow more and put more into HVAC, into roof replacement and the like. And so when we wait to the end like this, we're in a difficult situation and we have to make difficult choices. I appreciate the folks who are here today, the many who are not. We've received over 3,000 postcards from educators. I have them in my office. I've been reading them. I've spent the week hugging people who got those 800 emails and who have been crying for like the whole week about losing their jobs potentially. And so we're not in an ideal situation. We are going to have work to do next year, and then the year after that, and the year after that. We didn't get into this issue with our schools. I grew up and went to New Hampshire State's in Oakview Elementary, I know how bad it is. I was there the first day of school 2 years ago when we were kicking off school, and it was 90 degrees in the cafeteria. And so we have work to do. This does still allocate some money to that, but yes, we are going to have to come back and do more. And I think you're hearing from every colleague that we're committed to that work. But we have to make sure that the hardworking professionals that are helping our babies, my kids, our kids, each and every day, can be in those classrooms and can help them. So that's why I made the motion, and I appreciate my colleagues.
Thank you. Next, we're going to go back to, please don't clapping. Lori Ann Sells.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to hear more, if you can briefly just share how these projects were identified as the projects that would be delayed and how long they were in the pipeline? The elementary school.
Regarding you mean the major capital projects for the four elementary schools?
Yes.
Well, once we had decided, as I mentioned earlier, to prioritize Damascus High School and Eastern Middle School in the middle of the CIP, and they're very large projects, several $100 million combined. And we were still having to look at the systemic projects, which we were trying to support, such as HVAC and roofs. That didn't leave a lot left in the CIP. MCPS had already deferred them initially as part of their non-recommended reductions to help us with the initial gap between us and the executive's undesignated reductions he had made, even within his higher spending affordability assumption. So the non-recommended reductions helped us get part of the way there, but we still had a lot more to go. We had that $400 million gap. So there just wasn't a lot of other projects to look at other than deeper cuts in the level of effort projects.
Okay, thank you.
Next, I have Councilmember Andrew Friedson.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a quick question. Could you speak to, it was mentioned but not spoken in detail about the state aid impacts of this decision?
Oh, yeah. For the HVAC and roof projects, MCPS dependably gets about 50-50 or 50-50 split. If they put in $1, they're getting $1 of state aid for those projects. So depending on what we put in each fiscal year, we assume a certain amount of state aid will come in as well. So if we increase a year, and for instance, MCPS has shown increases in their HVAC and roof projects this year, they also assume higher state aid as part of that. However, the reverse is true as well. If we reduce those increases, we also have to reduce the state aid we're assuming. So they go hand in hand.
So essentially you're saying taking $1 out of HVAC because of the state match is really losing $2 in impact.
Right, and that gets to our priorities we mentioned, where we are trying to protect the projects that leverage outside sources of funding, such as state aid and federal aid. So that's why the reconciliation does still support increases in those projects, because you do get the extra bang for your buck. But ultimately, there's only so many local dollars to go around, and we do have to, at some point, make adjustments where the dollars are. So we were not able to fully fund, for instance, the HVAC and roof projects beyond the first 2 years in this in the $8 million ITOC reconciliation.
And reprogramming the $36 million, the net impact of state aid assumptions and would be what?
The chart on the addendum packet notes that with the HVAC reduction, or with the ITOC reduction in HVAC and the ITOC reduction in roof replacement, apart from some additional bonds we were able to find, as we mentioned earlier, we're still seeing about a $14.7 million reduction in what we're projecting for state aid in the 6-year period.
14.7 million.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I don't see anybody else wanting to speak on this motion, which I will support. I did introduce the progressive income tax structure, and I did it as one of the first things I did as council president because it's the right thing to do. Those who are making less money should be paying less income tax, and I don't regret that. And I am very grateful to all the 6 council members who supported that effort, and especially I want to thank Council Vice President Balcom and the members of the GAL committee for embracing it. And I attended the GAL committee work session for this item, And I did say, and I still believe that that money should have gone to the CIP as the GO committee concluded, because it's one-time money to help our schools for all the reasons that have been stated here. But this process evolves, I was going to say every day, but no, it's actually every minute, as you saw from yesterday. And at the end of the day, as council president, I'm going to move forward with the will of the body. And the will of the body is saying that the money needs to go to operating, and I'm going to support that. So with that, we have a motion on the table in a second. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand and hold it. Going to need to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those against, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. The motion passes. Thank you. Now we're, no copying, I heard. I'm gonna move on. Now I need a motion to approve, this whole one, to approve the operating budget. No, wait, I need a motion to approve the capital budget wrap-up and CIP reconciliation as amended in this session. Can I get a motion? Moved by Council Vice President Balcom. Can I get a second? Second by Council Member Sidney Katz. All those in favor, please raise your hand. So, hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All against? 1, 2. Yeah, we're set. 11. You got that. Thank you so much. Now we're going to move on to the operating budget wrap up in reconciliation. I'm going to turn it to council staff.
Okay, good morning. This will be a shorter presentation and discussion. You will take straw votes today on the entire FY27 operating budget for all departments and agencies that you have worked through for the past month. And the staff report includes all decisions the council made through Wednesday, and that includes the changes in net resource reductions, the changes in expenditure reductions, and the changes in items approved from the reconciliation list. And those are all included on circle pages 1 through 6 of the staff report. So the vote will be to approve those as is, with the addition of the $36 million that you just approved from taking to the CIP to the operating budget. So the only change to what is in the attachments would be the addition of 2 tranches of MCPS that were listed in the attachment as the not funded items, and move those into the funded items. And so with that, you will have a balanced operating budget that is about $6.9 billion in spending across all agencies, and will maintain reserves at the same levels as proposed by the county executive. Thank you.
So I'd like to make a motion to move 2 tranches from the unapproved list to the approved list.
Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion on the table by Council Vice President Balcom, second by Council Member Stewart, to move 2 trenches for MCPS. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Any passed unanimously. Great. Now we're going to vote on the operating budget. After the vote, we do speeches. So can I get a motion to approve the operating budget as amended today? Moved by Council Vice President Balcom, second by Council Member Katz. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All those against? 1, 2. 9 to 2. The motion passes. And as a reminder, we are gonna come back next week on Thursday for the vote on the final resolutions, which basically means that everything that we agreed on today is going to be placed on a resolution that we need to, and the staff needs time to coordinate all that. And that's why we come on Thursday to make that very quick vote without speeches. And what happened? Oh, yes. Before I turn it to colleagues and all of you who would like to speak, please let me know. I'm going to start with Council Vice President Balcom, and I'm going to turn it to Council Member Don Lukey, and then everybody else who tells me. But before I go there, I'm going to say, hold your horses, buddy. Yeah, thank you. So the following 2 months of intense deliberation, hard work, and collaboration, after all that, I am pleased to announce that the County Council has approved a $7.9 billion operating budget and a $6.3 billion capital budget for the upcoming year. The vote on the budget resolutions takes place next week, as I just announced. I want to thank, special thanks to Council Vice President Marilyn Balcom and all my colleagues on the council for the way we all came together to find solutions to benefit the residents of Montgomery County. It was not easy, as you can see, and that's because we find ourselves in an incredibly challenging fiscal and economic times. The federal government is retrenching, disrupting the livelihoods of federal workers and contractors that make Montgomery County home. In addition, they're implementing many policies that are harming our economy, from the horrific attacks on immigrant families, the war in the Middle East, to inflation and tariffs, which does affect Montgomery County. It is prudent to have a budget for the future with increasing downside risk. Next year is going to be tough. And it's in this context that the county executive transmitted to us a budget that missed the mark on so many levels. It recklessly raised taxes on wage earners and homeowners. It grew spending at unsustainable levels, and it wasn't or a structural deficit. This council mapped a different course. It was not perfect. We made challenging and at times painful decisions to balance the competing needs with limited resources. On the tax side, we were mindful of how difficult it is for residents to make ends meet in this economy. Ever-expanding costs, energy, food, rent, and healthcare, to name a few, overwhelming any increase in wages. That is why we rejected the county executive's proposed 6.3-cent property tax increase. We also rejected the reckless income tax increase proposed by the county executive that will have affected everyone regardless of how much money they make. That's why I introduced the progressive income tax structure, and I'm proud of it. And I want to thank once again my colleagues for supporting that. That's what progressives do. Instead, for the first time ever, we now have a progressive income tax structure where 95% of county wage earners will receive an income tax break. That's a big deal. While the highest earners will be asked to pay slightly more. I'm okay with that. We're putting more money in the packets for folks with lower incomes, particularly those who rent. The ITAC doesn't benefit renters. Keep that in mind. This is walking the walk on our progressive values, and I'm proud of it. On education, we approved a record funding of Montgomery County Public Schools with $143 million increase in local operating funding for MCPS. Is that enough? I know it's not. I'm just stating the fact of what we just did. This 6.1% increase from last year, again, 6.1% increase from last year, will support the Board of Education's efforts to address the achievement gap, provide security in the schools, and anything else they consider essential. And I need to emphasize that again because we are not the Board of Education. We give them the funds, they make the decisions. We don't have authority to tell them what to do with the funds. And I feel that I have said that at least once a week for the past 2 months. So I had to say it again. That's just the way the system is, okay? If you want to change it, talk to the Maryland General Assembly. We increase investments in our public safety departments, ensuring our first responders and public safety professionals have the resources they need to sustain service levels and strengthen their workforces. And I'm especially proud of the dedicated funding included in the capital budget for the new 4th District Police Station in Glenmont. I'm going to clap. That's my district. We have held our priority to protect safety net services by providing essential funding for nonprofit service providers. We increased their funding from last year, guys. We did. Recognizing that, is it enough? It's not, but we did. Recognizing that the demands on our nonprofit partners are higher than ever. And we have made continued investments to expand affordable housing and support services for working families. We understand that families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations across our wonderfully diverse county are operating in an ever-evolving fiscal reality where cruel and unpredictable changes made by the federal administration are requiring us all to step out and do more with less, especially because we're right next to Washington, D.C., and we have all these federal workers who live here. We take a really huge hit. Please don't forget that. Now, more than ever, the buck stops at the local level of government. It's our job to make fiscally responsible decisions on behalf of all our residents today and for Montgomery County's future. And our partners in label, and I'm going to highlight MAGGIO, FOP, and the International Association of Firefighters. They understand our situation. I truly appreciate their active role in helping us find savings and better, more cost-efficient ways to deliver essential services that target the most vulnerable. You have no idea how many meetings I have with those unions to make some reductions in the budget. You have no idea. So I want to publicly thank them. This work would not be possible without the dedicated support of the hardworking professionals in this building, thanks to the entire Council Central staff led by Executive Director Craig Howard and Deputy Director Sandra Marine and Jean Smith. Your knowledge, care, and attention to detail are essential to this budget process. I also want to thank the Clerk of the Council, Sarah Tenenbaum, and her team, Chief Attorney Christine Wellens. So many meetings with our legal team. Even late at night and over the weekends, I want to especially thank you, Ms. Wellens, for all your work. And the communications team with Sonia Healy. It is a privilege to work with each and every one of you, and I appreciate all you do on behalf of our amazing residents. Budgets are a model document, and this one helps us shape a fair, more sustainable future. We must finally deliver a progressive income tax. We have protected the most vulnerable with direct services, and that's the work of the operating budget that we did recently, making sure that we have funds for those people who are about to lose their home. We need to really make sure that we have the funds needed to avoid evictions. That's critical. We have protected them. We have helped keep costs down for residents struggling in this economy. We delivered wage increases to our dedicated, hardworking public employees. We did that. And we have supported our nonprofits and increased assistance to working families with young kids. That's very important. Together, we're meeting residents where they are today while setting the county up for a bright future. With that, I'm going to start turning it to colleagues, starting with Council Vice President Balcom.
Thank you. As I already mentioned, passing an $8 billion budget is a complex puzzle, and I want to appreciate everyone who worked so hard to get this done, to get here today. I first want to thank everyone on our central staff, particularly our Executive Director, Craig Howard, who has a very difficult job, and not only does he do it so expertly, but he adds so much needed patience and calm to the process, and I really appreciate that. And I also wanted to call out Jean Smith, who is another budget guru, for answering so many questions from all of us, and for always checking my math, which I walked into his office many times with a new proposal. And I also want to thank my team, Craig Wilson, Holly Mancuso, Wafa Jawad, led by Chief of Staff Lisa Mandel-Trapp. Everyone sitting up here knows how important and critical our teams are, not only in the last 2 weeks, but throughout the year. And I have to give a special shout out to Holly, who, in addition to the policy work she does, has answered the phones and managed the emails from thousands of constituents in the past couple weeks. And I know all of our staff have done that. Given that the proposed budget that we received in March had a significant budget gap of $189 million, the council worked together very closely to close that gap and to approve this budget today. This was due to large part to the leadership of our council president, Natalie Fanny Gonzalez, and the diligent work that she did every day, all evening, and then also to her chief of staff, Tommy Habor, who, for managing this impossible task of getting here today. The most important thing to remind everyone is that we started out with a pretty big hole, which meant that we could not fund everything that was being proposed. Each committee worked diligently for the past 2 months to look at every single line item for every single increase, and I appreciate that. So in addition to the over $140 million in additional funding for MCPS, we provided a small percentage of increase to our nonprofit partners. That was not enough, but we increased funding to our county attorney, to transportation, police, sheriff's office. We made sure to cover important services that were initially covered from federal grants, that we lost federal grant funding. It's important to make sure that we covered those. We have a very strong safety net for our most vulnerable residents, and we were able to add resources to most of the programming, including services for short-term housing and for our unhoused, and additional funds for some dental service. As we started those deliberations, it was unclear. It was very clear. We voted unanimously, almost, to not increase property taxes. And the proposal that came up to change the income tax structure was really a great move forward. But it's a very complicated process, and we're going to have to come up with a much simpler way to explain it to our residents. So as many emails that we received about schools, we received an equal amount about don't raise our taxes. And so we need to come up with a simpler way to explain that process, because it was very complex. As a district council member, I'm proud to see and excited to see that the Clarksburg Library remains on track, the Western County Recreation Center, which will house the only medical clinic in a rec center in the county. I'm very proud of that. So we have a lot of good news to share. We've got a lot of things that we did fund, but we have a lot of things that we did not fund. We didn't fund additional security for our libraries. We didn't fund specific dental services for our children. The increases to our nonprofits was very small, and we know that doesn't cover what you need. We didn't cover the increased cost of food to our senior nutrition programs. Flex bus service for Poolesville and Damascus, which they need to get to their doctor's appointments, and in Poolesville to get to the grocery store. We didn't fund that. We made additional cuts into the base budget for arts, Kids Museum, community grants, and the Green Bank. So it's a complicated budget where we simply couldn't fund everything that everybody wanted. So looking into the future, we have to focus more on sustainability. We need to really assess the economic competitiveness. We need to really take a good hard look at why, despite all the assets that we have in Montgomery County, we aren't creating jobs. I'm very happy that we were able to fund the base budget for the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, as well as Visit Montgomery. Both organizations focus on bringing jobs to the county. And of course, we need to continue to focus on housing affordability, and we have taken really bold steps this year to move that needle. And we need to work with the county executive and department heads and the school system to really create a sustainable model for the future. this model doesn't work. So we really have to look deep into that. So it's been a difficult week. I really feel blessed to be here. I don't take it for granted. And I really want to thank my colleagues for the very difficult work that we did this week. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to turn it to Council Member Don Lukey.
Thank you, Madam President. And yes, it has definitely been a long week, and I want to thank our entire council staff and everyone who weighed in during this budget process. Our phone lines have been busy, our inboxes have been very full, and I am heartened that we saw new people and new communities show up to fight for their priorities, explain their needs, and also to express their concerns. Families across Montgomery County are feeling the pressure of rising costs, economic instability, and growing anxiety about the future. People are worried about affordability, housing, childcare, healthcare, and whether they will continue to be able to build or sustain a stable life here in Montgomery County. That reality shaped how I approached this budget process and how I wanted to, and I've said this multiple times during the budget process, try to mitigate harm while living within the means that we have. We could not continue to raise tax rates on people on top of those rising costs and continued rising property assessments. And we could not continue to grow the structural deficit that will ultimately degrade services and leave us with little flexibility to respond to our crises that are not of our making and wholly outside of our control. I fully understand and respect the obligation to get the budget done so the government's work can continue. I get that. I also respect that budgets are moral documents. They are, which is why I so firmly believe in voting my conscience, which was to not support these two budgets as amended because of the concerns raised within them. I do respect the importance of compromise, and I was prepared to vote on a budget yesterday with many compromises, and that was far from perfect. It was a budget forged through weeks of open and transparent deliberations and through public votes on the dais. And then yesterday, literally as we were ready to vote, suddenly that transparent process was replaced by indecision, behind closed doors deal making, and major last minute changes that exacerbate our structural deficit. To provide a stark example of this, understand that the reductions in the capital budget you see here today that we talked about, and I want to thank staff for having those charts available, they were unknown to council members even this morning before we walked in here. That is not indicative of a serious deliberative process, and it is a disservice to our county. We are living in what will continue to persist as rough economic waters, and we must navigate them with caution and with purpose. Over time, relying too heavily on one-time funding sources and continuing to grow budgets faster than the county's revenue growth has created real challenges, both for our budget outlook and for residents who are already feeling financially stressed. We are voted on today, the body voted on, uses so much one-time revenue for ongoing costs that our total projected structural deficit will now be $293 million. Let me be clear, that means that the next county executive and council will be $293 million short, a gap, this time next year, just to meet the same spending total for the FY28 budget. The decisions then will be even harder than they were this year. There will be significant resources devoted to county government and MCPS that just simply will not exist past June 30th, 2027. To compound the problem, there will be fewer reserves available to make up the gap, less ability to once again dip into retirement healthcare funds to make up the difference, and overall fewer budget maneuvers available to plug that hole. That is the very definition of unsustainable. It's irresponsible, unfair to our employees, our educators, and residents, and that's why I couldn't support it. I personally view this as being fiscally negligent, which is why I could not support it, despite my firm understanding and knowledge and respect of the duty of this body to get a budget passed. It is my sincere desire that we will start immediately on a series of stakeholder meetings with our executive branch partners, our labor partners, and our nonprofit community to focus on a long-term strategy. This cannot wait until there's a new county executive, cannot wait until there's a new council. This has to happen now in order to address the significant revenue gap that this budget sets up for this very time next year. And I do too want to lift up, and I know Council President Fanny Gonzalez already did, but our labor partners at IAFF, McGeo, and FOP have already been doing this work and have committed to being at that table and helping us work through this. And I certainly wanted to give them thanks for that and recognize them and appreciate them for their willingness to accept and understand the federal government is not going to send us a windfall of money, and neither is the state of Maryland. We have to fix this ourselves. Despite my opposition to the budgets today, there are significant investments and things that I know that we can all be thankful for, and that it is important to note that we're already part of the budget that was ready for approval yesterday that I wanted to support so badly. We will continue our strong social safety net services in HHS. We're making an important investment in additional coverage for uninsured and underinsured people in our county through the Montgomery Cares program, supporting our homelessness prevention, and provided needed cost of living adjustments for adult medical daycare and developmental disability providers at a time of great need as the state of Maryland has stepped back from that commitment. We're significantly increasing our support for MCPS, and I want to reiterate that there were not cuts. There aren't cuts. Every year in the operating budget, we are determining how much more to give the school system, not cutting their budget from last year's budget. The budget that was set to be approved yesterday would have increased the county tax-supported contribution by 4.6% over last year's county tax-supported contribution to MCPS's operating budget, but without requiring significant one-time funds. In return, my ask is this. All school stakeholders and county residents deserve strong fiscal management from MCPS, solid leadership, and an emphasis on student development and performance with safe working and learning conditions. We've also made real strides in public safety recruiting and staffing that we've solidified with resources to hire our emergency call center operators to fully staff this critical operation and reduce our 911 response times. I am proud of that, and I also remain firmly committed to working with our blended fire service on recruitment and retention of career and volunteer fire EMS, and with our police department on their ongoing recruitment efforts. There are also things to celebrate in the CIP that I worked really hard on trying to make sure we're in there and stayed there, like Damascus High School's major renovation project, the Shady Grove West Library that is part of ongoing transit-oriented development in that community, the Bowie Mill Bikeway project, which is funded with state grants, and parks investments, including Johnson's Local Park in Emery Grove. Finally, I want to take a moment to thank my team, Aaron, Sarah, Caroline, Doug, and Piper, as well as our entire central staff, who have all worked tremendously hard on this budget and who have spent many late hours dealing with concerns, updates, and ongoing I think our council president said it well. Things were changing minute by minute, and their care and dedication to public service is outstanding. It's not easy work, particularly during periods of uncertainty and constant change, and also when people are calling or showing up and they are escalated. And our entire team inside the council office building does a tremendous job for that, and I am deeply grateful for their professionalism, compassion, thoughtfulness, and unwavering commitment to this community. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Next, I have Councilmember Shara Evans.
Okay. You all know I get emotional, so I'm going to try to get through this. Okay. So when I applied for this position on the council, I did my homework. I attended committee meetings. I attended council sessions. I read packets and OLO reports. I understood that public service would require difficult decisions, long hours, and thoughtful leadership. What I could not fully prepare for was the weight that comes with balancing competing needs during one of the most challenging budget cycles our county has faced in years. My colleagues have said many times that this budget season has been unprecedented. And after walking through this process together, I understand exactly why that word has been used so often. This experience reinforced for me that governing is not simply about advocating for the issues we care most deeply about. It is about stewardship. It is about understanding that every dollar entrusted to us belongs to the residents of Montgomery County, and every decision we make carries consequences for families, workers, seniors, businesses, our schools, and communities across this county. I came in with a deep understanding of MCPS and spent these past months working to deepen my understanding of the many agencies, departments, services, and safety net programs that residents depend on every single day. I want to thank council staff, Craig, Jean, and the entire team of analysts who guided us through this process with professionalism and patience. Their expertise mattered tremendously during this difficult season, and I would be remiss if I didn't thank the staff for the additional briefings and weekend calls and their efforts to get me the work that I needed to get this job done. As council members, we are called to hold multiple truths at the same time. We know our residents expect strong schools, safe communities, reliable services, housing support, parks, transportation, and opportunities for families to thrive. We also know that fiscal responsibility matters, stewardship matters, sustainability matters. As I also think it is important for residents who may not fully understand the budget process to know this. This budget is created by the county executive and then sent to the county council for approval. At that point, the council is tasked with making extraordinarily difficult decisions about what can be funded, what cannot be funded, and how we responsibly manage the taxpayers' dollars entrusted to us. And believe me when I say we were sent a very difficult budget. This year, those decisions became even harder as local governments across the country continue to feel the impact of a federal government that has too often shown little care or compassion for the growing needs of people. Funding cuts and eliminations at the federal level are having real consequences for American families and for counties like ours that are trying to fill widening gaps in services and support. So when this budget came before us, my colleagues and I were faced with very difficult realities and limited options. We worked day and night to find solutions to protect critical services and to make decisions that reflected both compassion and fiscal responsibility. We know that education remains central to the strength and future of this county, while also recognizing that residents depend on us to responsibly balance investments across all areas of government. That balancing act is not easy, but it is part of the responsibility entrusted to us as elected leaders. There were real needs throughout this process. There were requests rooted in genuine urgency and deserving of support. And there were moments where every one of us had to weigh what was ideal against what was financially sustainable and achievable. Even in the midst of these difficult realities, I believe we worked hard to protect the core services that our residents depend on. We preserved support for working families. We strengthened emergency assistance for vulnerable residents. We continued investments in nonprofit organizations that often serve people first and fastest. And we worked to ensure county government continues to function in ways residents can rely on. Those decisions reflect our values, but they also reflect restraint. And it is not always easy in public office. Sometimes leadership requires saying yes. Sometimes leadership requires saying no. And sometimes leadership requires finding balance in the middle, even knowing no one leaves fully satisfied. I also want to acknowledge the people behind those budget lines, the employees across county government and our school system who show up every day committed to serving residents and students, the educators, support professionals, public safety personnel, frontline workers, nonprofit leaders, and county employees who continue carrying enormous responsibilities during difficult times. Their work matters deeply in this county. While there were disagreements throughout this process, I believe my colleagues approached this budget with seriousness, compassion, and a shared commitment to Montgomery County. We wrestled with hard choices because the stakes are real for the people we serve. And our work does not end with this vote. In many ways, it begins here. We must continue having honest conversations about how we strengthen our fiscal foundation, evaluate spending thoughtfully, grow our economy responsibly, and ensure our investments produce meaningful outcomes for residents. Public trust is built when residents know their government is being thoughtful with both their needs and their resources. That is the standard I will continue striving to meet. I am grateful to my team, Beth, Kristen, Pam, and Jackie, and grateful to my colleagues on this dais for navigating this difficult process together. Though the path was demanding and the decisions were not easy, we worked through every challenge with care. And I remain resolved to deepen my commitment to this county and to the people who have entrusted us with the responsibility to serve. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Councilmember Sidney Katz.
Thank you very much, Madam President. When we first received this budget, I said that it was the worst budget I have ever had to deal with in all of my years in elected office. And I certainly told the truth. After 12 years on this council, I have learned that the budget season has its own rhythm. Some years are tough, but then there was this year. A budget that was just brutal, with some very difficult and painful decisions that had to be made. The county executive proposed a 6.3% property tax increase. Council declined to adopt it. In my opinion, that was the right call. With the impact felt by our federal workers, small businesses, and our neighbors facing uncertainty and households already stretched to their limit by the rising cost of living and increases in property tax assessments. We set up a progressive income tax structure to help it be accomplished in a more equitable way. We maintain the working family income supplement. Montgomery County is one of the few jurisdictions to offer a local match to the state's income tax credit. This credit helps their residents most in need and will provide some relief against the rising cost of living. As chair of the Public Safety Committee, I can tell you that protecting our public safety infrastructure is not optional. It is a necessity. This budget takes some concrete steps to do that. The Emergency Communication Center, our 911 call center, over 25 positions were cut in fiscal year 2025 because we were unable to fill them. The good news is we can fill them now. We have invested $1.9 million to fund 25 positions in this budget. These are our 911 call takers, our first responders, and we need to ensure they are sufficiently staffed to best serve our community. Animal shelter staffing. Our animal shelter has been over capacity for years. By law, it cannot turn away abandoned or abused animals, no matter how full it gets. More animals with the same number of staff means longer waits for feeding, medication, exercise, and the daily care that keeps animals healthy and adoptable. We were able to provide the shelter with an additional 2 animal care attendants. While this is a step in the right direction, we know the shelter needs more resources, and we need to keep working to meaningfully improve conditions to fulfill the county's commitment to animal welfare. Automated external defibrillators, better known as AEDs, in police patrol vehicles. Police officers often arrived at a medical scene before paramedics do. AEDs in patrol vehicles are a basic, life-saving tool. When seconds matter, air officers need to be equipped. The budget ensures these units are current and ready to use. Outside of public safety, I want to mention how pleased I am that we are funding linkages to learning services at Twin Brook Elementary School this year. Twin Brook is the only Title I and community school in the Rich-Montgomery cluster with a significant need for academic and behavioral health supports, childcare, financial aid, food assistance, and other resources that linkages to learning will provide the students and their families. In regard to capital improvements, we need to do what's right for our community and for those who work in our county. The 4th District Police Station, built in 1959, this is the oldest police station in Montgomery County. This building has been subject to significant health and safety concerns, including plumbing and sewer failures, HVAC issues, leaks, and mold. This project must keep moving forward. I also want to thank everyone who reminded us of the impact that the Montgomery College Theater Arts Building on the Rockville campus has to our community. Thanks to our partners in the state, this project will continue to move forward within the 6-year CIP. And I want to thank Montgomery College for being incredible partners with the county during these budget deliberations. The county is truly a gem, not just for our county and our state, but we can easily see why it continues to be ranked among the top community colleges nationwide. As much as we have funded in this budget, there's always more we would have liked to have done. And this goes especially for Montgomery County Public Schools. With fiscal constraints at hand, there was only so much we could do. I would have liked to have provided additional funding for MCPS, but this budget, unfortunately, would not allow for that this year. As we have all emphasized, this truly has been an exceptionally challenging budget. In the end, this budget reflects the perseverance of the council and generally hard trade-offs needed to get here today. I want to thank President Natalie Fanny Gonzalez for her unwavering leadership and tireless work coordinating with council members and staff throughout the process. I have often said being the Montgomery County Council President is a thankless job. A sincere thank you to the Executive Director, he's getting a lot of that today, Director Craig Howard, Deputy Director Gene Smith for their leadership and guidance as we navigated the complexities of this budget and always being available to answer our questions at any time of the day or evening. Thank you to my public safety colleagues, committee colleagues, Councilmember Lukey and Mink, and I appreciate the guidance and expertise of our public safety analysts, Susan Farag and Logan Anbinder. Thanks to my Government Operations Committee colleagues, Chair Stewart and Councilmember Evans. And a big thank you to the entire Council Central Office staff for all of their support. I want to thank my own team, my Chief of Staff, Sharon Ledner, Deputy Chief of Staff, Laurie Edberg, Suzanne Lofjan, Shannon Sicard, and Juan Javel. And finally, I want to thank my colleagues. I believe it must be noted that in order to get to 8 votes, things have been agreed to that, in my opinion, are very poor business decisions, not only for the short term, but the long term as well. It concerns me what will happen if those same poor decisions continue for future budgets. It concerns me that some wanted us to take from our reserves. It concerns me when someone votes against a proposal and then holds the rest of the budget hostage unless that same money is spent in an unrealistic way. It concerns me that some think that the way to solve our financial issues is to borrow more, and knowing the repayment of the debt comes from the operating budget, that will lead to bigger problems for future budgets. It concerns me that this budget has become a vehicle for no compromise, but for a way that someone can do something so they can send another press release. Our system is broken, and we must do what President Fanny Gonzalez and Vice President Balcom have said that they're going to do, to be working on changing the system with our partners, to find real solutions in real time, where compromise is done in the right way. A budget must be approved for what it has been able to accomplish, and we must remember that when we vote for it, we are voting for the parts we do like, and hold our nose for the parts we don't. But because a budget must be passed to allow the public, our residents, our businesses, and our neighbors to continue to be served and protected, because above everything else, that is their most important job. Thank you, Madam President.
Very well said. Thank you so much. Before I turn it to my next colleague, two quick things because it has been mentioned, and I have said this many times throughout the past few weeks. We will be having sessions in the fall to talk about how government sustainability, everything that we have in the county, how we're working together. And the idea is to have those conversations with our labor unions, with our business community, with our nonprofits, and with whoever wins the county executive race. That's got to happen, and it has to happen because the path that we are on as a county is truly unsustainable. The needs are getting bigger, and we really need to have a serious discussion on that. And I have had those one-on-one discussions with our labor leaders, and I look forward to materializing all those ideas. I also want to recognize that it's already 11:53, and this room is still almost full. And I want to acknowledge that the people in this room are mostly members of the Teachers Union and SCIU. And I want to thank you for your leadership and for really working together and holding us accountable, because that's part of the process. Okay, no, please. And I just want to acknowledge that you're still here, and that means a lot. So thank you for all your work. I'm going to turn it to Councilmember Andrew Friedson.
Thank you, Madam President. First and foremost, thank you to our central staff for your patience, diligence, and expertise, capably led by Craig Howard, and with thoughtful and very active engagement and fast turnaround from Gene Smith throughout this process, as well as the entire central staff. We work with extraordinary people here in this building, and I'm very proud to come to work every day. Thank you to my office team, Cindy, Matt, Angela, Warren, and Andrew, for your round-the-clock work navigating through an incredibly difficult couple months. And thank you to all of our executive departments, outside agencies, labor, nonprofit partners, and the hardworking people who you represent for your collaboration in helping us navigate through some very, very difficult decisions. I know for many of you, as well as for us. The county executive's recommended budget came before the council structurally imbalanced, using one-time reserves to pay for ongoing expenses and funded with multiple tax increases. I appreciate that this budget provides $144 million more for schools and fulfills contracts for our public employees and public safety professionals. However, it still contains tax increases and balloons the structural deficit to nearly $300 million. That isn't affordable for county taxpayers or for county government. Using one-time resources to pay for ongoing expenses is the definition of fiscally unsustainable. It sets up a fiscal cliff without a parachute. Not only will the elimination of the $692 ITOC credit hit every homeowner, a $293 million structural deficit is the equivalent of starting next year, meaning July 1st, with a hole equivalent to an 11% property tax hike. I've said from the outset that I would not support a budget that includes tax increases at a time when our families are facing a cost of living crisis. While some have changed their views, I've been consistent throughout this budget process and every year prior. While I respect my colleagues and truly appreciate the council president and vice president, as well as all council members for your diligent work these last several weeks in extremely challenging circumstances, I can't support a budget and didn't support a budget with a tax increase. We simply can't make Montgomery County more affordable if we continue to make it more expensive. And we can't address our fiscal and economic challenges if we continue to make them worse.
Thank you. Councilmember Kate Stewart.
Sorry, I thought you were going to be longer. My apologies. So I think probably up here, the only person who's worked on more municipal local budgets is Councilmember Katz. This is my 13th. Unlucky number. Yeah, I can tell you as an elected official, I've worked on budgets through the first Trump administration, COVID, and now, and I can say this was the most difficult budget I've ever worked on. Before I go into some details, I do want to thank, as my colleagues had, the incredible work of our county departments, our central staff here, Mr. Howard and Mr. Smith in particular, but all of our analysts. We have an incredible group of analysts who work very long hours to go through the budget when we receive it from the county exec's office. They prepare packets that help us go through and understand better in a very short amount of time the county executive's budget. And they do an outstanding job. And I just want to thank each and every one of them. For time purposes, I won't name them, but in particular, those who work with me with the Government Operations Committee, I just want to say thank you, thank you. This was a lot this year, especially when we went through different tax scenarios. And I just want to thank all of the residents, many of you who are here today, but also those who've reached out to my office, who I've seen at events in the community. Thank you for your feedback on priorities. Ensuring that we can work together in times like these is essential as we're seeing needs grow in our county. As we look for ways to fulfill needs of our residents, our schools, our parks, our nonprofits, we have fewer resources before us right now and many, many unknowns. I know this is a time many people are scared, frustrated, and angry at the current circumstances. The role of government, especially our local government, is to help residents through these difficult times. It is to serve the people of our community and use our tax dollars to improve their lives and make their lives better. So, as my colleagues have done before me, I want to speak truthfully that this budget represents great compromises. And even with those great compromises, we do not meet all the needs for our nonprofits, for our schools, for our health and human services. We did not finish in an optimal place. I wish there was more funding available for all of these things. And I know this is going to mean very difficult decisions for our partners. To make this budget work, we had very specific options. And I know that, as my colleagues have said, what the county executive gave us was a big task to work with. Over the last few weeks, we have reduced our county government budget by over $100 million. We've looked really carefully at our budgets, and we know these cuts are not going to be inconsequential. But to make the puzzle work, we either needed to increase taxes or do with what we have. And as I said before, there was not an appetite for new taxes, so we looked at our budgets very carefully. And today I'm going to support this budget because I believe at this time this is the best that we are going to do. It's important to note that not only did the county executive give us a budget that was not sustainable for us, and the taxes he was proposing for our residents who are already greatly burdened was not going to work. We also need to note that as we've gone through this budget, we had to take into account what the federal government and state had passed down to us and what they had cut. We had to put in from our operating money, money to keep emergency management personnel because those grants have been cut by the federal government. And we know that there is more to come because we also know what the Republicans did at the federal level was time many of the deepest federal cuts and new guidelines to go into effect after this midterm election. So there are still many unknowns for us to prepare for. This budget does accomplish a number of things. As many of us have advocated for many years, we now have a progressive income tax here in Montgomery County. That does mean that 75% of filers in this county will see their income tax reduced. We were also able to preserve the Working Families Income Supplement here at the county. And as we stated before, that support goes to people who don't have income. and are not getting this income tax reduction. So we will see our residents with the lowest incomes who are bearing the brunt of inflation and federal aid cuts are going to see a reduction in their income taxes, while those with higher incomes will pay more. We did, as we've talked about this morning, eliminate the ITOC, which is tied to home ownership and an application process. And so this will benefit and restructure our tax system to be more equitable and to help renters, not just homeowners, in our community. As the council member who has the most shelters for those who are experiencing housing insecurity, I'm very glad that this council was able to fund the money for our homeless services. We have seen great strides being made by our county department in this area, and I'm glad to see that we were able to continue that funding. We were also able to increase the inflationary adjustment for our nonprofits. The county executive sent over a budget that only had an inflationary adjustment of 2.5%, much, much lower than they need. We were only able to get to 3.5%, and I know this is still going to be very difficult for them, but I'm glad we were able to increase it. I want to thank my colleagues, council president and vice president and their teams for their work. I particularly want to thank my colleagues on the GO committee. Councilmember Katz, this is your last budget.
You know, that might be okay.
That might be okay. But I just want to take this moment to say that we have been able to serve when I was mayor and you were on this county council for many years. Over those years, we tussled a bit on tax duplication, but we were able to accomplish a good deal there. And then being able to serve on this body with you over these last few years, and particularly the GO committee, has been a great privilege of mine. I have learned a lot from you over the years and deeply respect you. And so I want to thank you for that. And Councilmember Evans, our newest person on the council and the GO committee. I have deeply respected you for many years and the work you have done in our community. And seeing how you have navigated this budget, the choices that you have made with thoughtfulness and care, I just say I very much appreciate you and the work we've done together. I want to thank my own staff, my chief of staff, Cecily Thorne, my deputy, Paul B. Ellis, Kieran Kosher McCabe, who's the point person on our schools and has done, everyone's done a great job. Diana Carrillo, Deborah Getachew, and Andrew Gelman, and particularly for Deborah and Andrew, who, and Andrew in particular, who answers our phones in our office. He has spoken to many of you, and we very much appreciate the feedback you have given us. Again, to our central staff, thank you for all your work. I hope the decisions we make here will help us meet our community needs. I know there's still more that we need to do, and we need to recognize in the next few years that we are going to have many challenges. We must be thinking not only how we prepare ourselves now, but what we're going to do in the future. So this isn't the best budget. In my experience over 13 years doing this, but I have voted for it today because we need to move forward to support our county residents as best we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Councilmember Krista Mink.
There are a lot of important items in this budget. I'm going to mention just a few of them before I address the part that brought almost everyone to this full room today. In District 5, we protected funds for a new Eastern Middle School. Construction will begin in FY28. We maintained funding for an East County campus of Montgomery College. We maintained funding for the Viva White Oak project. I requested that we increase funding for one of our 2 Montgomery Cares dental clinics, the Muslim Community Center, Medical Clinics Oral Health Program. Their level of funding has been flat since 2014, and this was needed to keep up with increasing demand. We secured ongoing funding for the American Diversity Group Medical Clinic, which is based in East County but serves vulnerable residents from across the county for free and is one of very few places where vulnerable residents can access care on the weekends. We secured a 5% increase For year 2 of the East County Dental Pilot Program, we funded crossing guards for the new Burtonsville Elementary School after over a decade of promises to a school where 0 students walk to school. This fall, the doors will open on a new school where most students can walk, and they'll be able to do so with a crossing guard. We secured funding to support residents in need of housing assistance, funding for county staff to perform nursing home inspections. This is something that my own staff have had to do because we weren't getting the response we needed from the state. So this was urgent. And a lot of other important things. To MCPS staff, I know this is not a budget to celebrate. We don't know for sure which jobs we didn't save. But as a former teacher and a current MCPS parent, I know that it doesn't matter how excellent a teacher is, you need a much broader support system in order for our kids to access their full potential. Bus drivers, cafeteria staff, building services, media assistants, college and career counselors, family engagement specialists, social workers, EML therapeutic counselors, so many people inside and outside the classroom are part of this essential infrastructure for our kids. And there are many jobs amongst those and others on that potential cut list. So I know this is not a budget to celebrate, but it is a budget. It might not feel like it, but it is a budget that reflects incredible union organizing and power. You saved hundreds of jobs. And I want you to know how much of a difference you made. So I want to, and I know it doesn't feel like it, but I want to be clear and transparent about the course of events. What feels like a lifetime ago, but was actually 3 or 4 weeks ago when a $90 million cut to MCPS was on the table. Councilmember Jawando recommended limiting MCPS cuts to $30 million, and he had done the work of wading through the base budget to find cuts to actually produce a budget that demonstrated that that was possible as a baseline. Of course, we have wanted to do better, but I want to thank him for his leadership, because doing that real work early was key to keeping alive the possibility of keeping the cuts out of those truly even worse, even more catastrophic ranges. And as momentum kept trying to push us further toward deep cuts being inevitable, limiting our options for meeting that bare minimum, I do want to acknowledge that Councilmember Jawando has continued to be a really outstanding leader and partner in that space, who genuinely did real work and made tough calls for the greater good and held the line when it needed to happen. And people might say that it's political, but it just deserves to be said, and you can see it in our public sessions. I joined him to make a formal recommendation as a majority of the Education and Culture Committee that the council limit MCPS cuts to no more than $30 million. And as you know, it has been an extremely rocky path to end up even in that range. Over the last couple of weeks, I've spent much of my time adjusting about 4 or 5 different revenue and budget proposals that could potentially have a path to 8 votes and that could sustain our most critical services in this time of increased need and reduced federal and state funding. And to be clear, our most critical services includes our schools. I transparently provided options that did not use the existing income tax framework, and that does use it. the one we're using today, which uses the existing income tax framework, which does provide a tax cut that I don't believe we can afford, funds it by eliminating a tax credit that some of our vulnerable residents do rely on, and limited us to really only one path to funding MCPS at a remotely adequate level, a path that none of us, including me, think is ideal, but that enough of us think is more responsible than cutting 40% of the MCPS request. When we were sitting here yesterday afternoon, we had a budget before us that would have cut $73 million. That was yesterday at 1 p.m. That's 40% of the MCPS request. And I'll say first that we were at 73 and not worse, in large part because of your engagement. And then you showed up. People in this building are saying it's the biggest turnout that they have ever seen. You were the physical presence of all of those emails and calls that we've been getting. And as you saw yesterday, when it came down to that high pressure moment, we had the votes needed to block that budget on behalf of MCPS. And we are back today having cut that in half. I want to do more, but we are back today having cut that in half since yesterday. So thank you. You did save hundreds of jobs, and I know it is not enough, and I am sorry, but I want you to know the power that you have effectively held and wielded as we go into what I know are going to be very, very difficult and painful times. MCPS is less than half the budget. It wasn't always less than half, but its share has decreased, and I know that you all see the results. So that shows that the MCPS budget has grown at a slower rate than the budget of the rest of county government, and everybody's budget grows every year because of inflation and so forth. But MCPS still continues to face far greater cuts to the request than the rest of county government, even as budget transparency has increased exponentially even over the last couple of years. We just have to get to a place where we are not fighting the same fight every year, scrapping for crumbs. We just can't keep doing this, and it doesn't make sense. So that's work to come. And on the overall budget side, we have to get to a more sustainable place. We can't be relying on one-time funds to meet these barest of minimums. We can't rely on increasing property taxes. We need more progressive taxation options. We need more tools. We need that from the state. We need to be able to tax the rich more so that we can better afford to lower taxes for lower income residents. The state is working on that. I want to thank Delegate Janelle Wilkins for her leadership there. I want to thank Delegate Julie Polakovich-Carr for her incredible leadership there. We've just got an incredible Montgomery County delegation that's working on this. But the need is urgent, and we will continue to engage in that so that we are not back here again and again and again. Thank you all.
Thank you. Next, Councilmember Lorian Sells.
Good afternoon, TGIF. It's been a very, very long week, and I want to thank everyone who has stayed up until this moment, who has closely followed the budget process over the past few months since the county executive first released the recommended budget, which proposed significant increases in property and income taxes. We've been addressing the issue of affordability that is already out of reach for far too many of our residents. Asking working families, seniors on fixed incomes, and neighbors already struggling under the weight of rising costs to pay more should never be our first option. Residents are not simply revenue sources, they are people we serve. And the government's responsibility is to ease hardship, not deepen it. This budget process tested all of us. This is my 8th budget in my political career, and we debated hard. We wrestled with impossible trade-offs. We reached moments where consensus felt entirely out of reach, so much so that this council made the decision to postpone a final vote so we could continue working toward a better path forward. And while that process was not easy, I believe that additional time mattered. It allowed us to continue negotiating, to challenge one another, and ultimately build greater consensus around how to lessen the blow of cuts that will still be felt across county government and within our schools and community. Because the truth is, there were no easy answers. Every cut has consequences. Every delayed investment affects real people, families, workers, children, and seniors who rely on county services, not as a luxury, but as a lifeline. That reality is what guided me through this almost $8 billion budget process. As chair of the Health and Human Services Committee and lead for eliminating disparities, I examine this budget line by line, program by program, with one central priority: protecting the health and wellness and safety above all else. Programs that keep families housed, fed, and healthy are non-negotiable. When someone's facing eviction, struggling with food insecurity, or trying to access behavioral health care services for their children, there's no room for government indifference when homelessness is at its highest. That's why I fought to protect critical health and human services and to defend the nonprofit providers who serve as the backbone of our safety net. We preserve the overwhelming majority of those priorities, but not all. I remain disappointed that we were unable to secure funding for the Community Connect portal, a critical investment that would have streamlined access to services and reduced barriers for residents too often left navigating a fragmented system. That fight is not over. At the same time, protecting HHS alone was never enough. Our public schools are one of the greatest engines of opportunity in this country. Families move here because of Montgomery County Public Schools. I'm one of them. I chose MCPS to educate my daughter because I believe in what our schools can make possible. That is why I refuse to accept a false choice between fiscal discipline and educational investment. After protecting our most essential services, I fought to direct every available dollar and then some to our schools. And when that still wasn't enough, I listened to any alternative proposal shared by colleagues to shift capital dollars into operating funds to help prevent even deeper and more devastating cuts to MCPS. Those conversations were difficult. They required us to rethink priorities, confront uncomfortable realities, and make compromises none of us wanted to make. But leadership is not about avoiding discomfort. It's about standing firm in your values while navigating hard decisions. This budget reflects that struggle. It reflects compromise, discipline, responsibility, but it also reflects scarcity despite an $8.5 billion price tag. I do not believe any of us should grow comfortable with that. I know some residents will continue to struggle. Some nonprofits will remain stretched thin. Some families will still feel unseen. Some of the cuts we could not avoid will be deeply felt. County government, our schools, and across this community. It weighs heavily on me, and I know I've shared sleepless nights with many colleagues and residents. I know that I am grateful for what we were able to accomplish in this budget. We focused on the affordability for our community. We fought for our public schools. We prioritized health, wellness, and safety, food insecurity, and health care access. We rejected proposed tax increases in favor of a progressive income tax structure, illustrating our focus on fiscal responsibility and taxpayer relief. While changes remain, this budget reflects compromise and a commitment to continue delivering essential services in line with our community's core values. I want to thank our extraordinary essential staff, my HHS committee members, economic development committee members, our legal staff, our analysts. Oh my goodness. Thank you for the packets, the data analysis, working with OMB, the departments, Gene Smith, Keith Levchenko, Christine Wellens, and especially Tara Clemens Johnson, Nicole Rodriguez Hernandez, Monsi Gozalia, and Bilal Ali for their tireless work and expertise throughout this process. I want to thank our legal team for guiding us through incredibly complex decisions and ensuring accountability every step of the way. I want to thank the advocates, nonprofit leaders, labor representatives, educators, and residents who testified, organized, emailed, called, and demanded better from all of us. Your voices shaped this budget and your advocacy mattered. I also want to thank my staff and interns, the true MVPs of this process. Joseph Galula and Sierra Gray, thank you for going above and beyond to show up for the over 1 million residents we serve. Sandra and Lauren, Sarah and her team, Sonia and the PIO, everyone who keeps the county council or the people's county government running smoothly despite infrastructure needs, carry an enormous burden of ensuring connectivity with our community while juggling hundreds of staff, 11 type A personalities in our staff, technology, professionalism, compassion, and grace through long nights and difficult decisions. This council and this county are better because of your work. I remain proud to serve on a council where, despite our disagreements, every member is striving to do what they believe is best for our residents. We debated fiercely, we pushed one another, we counted every dollar, and ultimately we found enough common ground to move forward together. But our work is far from over. We have no sustainable economic pathway forward to diversify how we generate revenue. The people we serve deserve a government that fights for them every single day, a government committed to building a county where opportunity, dignity, and security are not reserved for a fortunate few, but are truly shared by all. That work remains ahead, and I remain committed to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Councilmember Wojowondo.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to first thank you for your leadership through the process. It was not easy. We didn't always agree, but you landed the plane today, and you deserve credit. I understand. Thank you to our council staff, specifically to every analyst who made this possible, the leadership, Mr. Howard and your team. I want to thank each and every one of my colleagues for their work. One thing I have no doubt is that we all think we're doing the right thing, and we're trying to help people. We don't always come about it the same way, but I don't doubt that. I want to especially thank, I'm proud and really humbled to chair the Education and Culture Committee, and I have two great, outstanding members, Councilmember Evans and Councilmember Mink. And thank you for your diligent work on the committee and on this council to protect students and families and educators. I want to thank each member of my staff, of whom I ask a lot. And they continually step up. Isata, Dave, Marisa, Ola, Michael, and our interns and volunteers, past and present, and Christina Neidlinger, who was with me for 4 years, who left this year. Let me start with what this council faced. We were sent a budget that had a 6.3 cent property tax increase that almost every colleague did not support, including me. So we had a $189 million gap to close, and we had to do it ourselves. We're in an unprecedented moment. The Trump administration is attacking our federal workforce, our immigrant communities, our schools, and our economy. That is a real and present threat, and it's what we're up against. So I did something that I had never done before and that I hadn't seen done before in the budget process. I proposed over 80 line item reductions to county government operations. It was hard. I took a lot of flack for it. Some of these reductions were painful, including saying that we should reduce the MCPS budget to meet this deficit by $30 million or do no more than that. They're programs I care about, investments I believe in, but it was necessary because government is a people business. And when you're asking working families to tighten their belts, we have to show them that we're doing the same. It's not enough to say you're against property tax increases. You have to do the work. You have to go line by line and make the hard calls. That means operational shifts, real efficiencies, being willing to look at where items are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, making sure our tax dollars are working the right way. As other colleagues have mentioned, we have to change the way we raise revenue. We need real differential tax rates. We need to stop giving tax breaks for luxury housing and then telling educators we can't afford to keep them in the classroom. The money is here. We're in the top 40 most wealthiest counties in the nation out of 3,500. We have to have the courage to go and get that revenue in a fair way and the discipline to spend it right. I think this council got it wrong on the income tax offset credit. I voted no. Not because I'm against progressive taxation. I started my council journey pushing for progressive taxation. But I do not think we should have made that change this year in this way, in this budget. My colleagues who supported it, I know they came to it in good faith for good reasons, and I thank them. But I think it was a mistake, and that's why I voted against it. Once this budget is adopted, I do look forward to convening that work group with labor partners, MCPS, the county executive's office, and the communities most affected by the decisions we're making in this room. We have to stop having the same fight every spring, the same gaps, the same painful choices in the final week. We have to do the structural work to figure out a better bargaining and budgeting process. And I'm ready to lead that and be a part of that, and I know colleagues will join. And I just want to say something about the people who came here this morning and now into the afternoon. Our educators, our support staff, our principals, our parents, thank you. We see you. I see you. I know many, many of you are worried about your jobs right now. I know some of you are sitting next to colleagues who might lose theirs. I'm not going to stand here or sit here and wave around a number and say we're proud of it and tell you to feel good about it. But as you've heard, I want you to know what happened. When we started this process, we were looking at more than $100 million in potential cuts to MCPS. The cuts on the table then they're not the cuts that are on the table today and not what we voted for. They were much, much deeper. They reached further into classrooms. And as you just saw earlier this morning, the council passed a motion that I made to bring back $36 million into the MCPS budget by drawing from CIP cash. The positions that were preserved today are preserved because you showed up, because you testified, because you protested, because you called. You made it possible for the body and for us to not look away. The community couldn't look away. You did that. We didn't do it. You did it. And I know it's not enough, and that sucks. There's still going to have to be staff reductions. For every person in this room or who's watching that's facing that uncertainty, I'm going to work with our labor partners in MCPS to help find opportunities the best I can. And I know that the Board of Education, who I know is watching, will take a hard look at how they are allocating the resources they do have. The choices inside that budget matter just as much as the total number. The fact is we underinvest in our school system. We invest less proportionally than comparable jurisdictions, and the need has only grown in ways for people who went to MCPS in the 80s or 90s cannot imagine. Over 150 languages spoken, half of our students eligible for free and reduced lunch, a marker for poverty, a special education population, including my daughter, that has grown dramatically over the last several years. The complexity of what we ask you to do each day is not what was happening a generation ago. It's harder, it costs more, and we have not kept up. Enrollment is declining, but at the same time, people would say that that means we need to spend less. It's the opposite. Special education enrollment is actually increasing in raw numbers. And if we want to reduce class size, which this budget attempted to do, you don't pull back funding, you step up so that we can make it easier for our educators to do their work. When counselors disappear, when buildings fall apart, you reverse that. You're the people in those rooms that make a dark classroom bright by dressing it up yourself, by putting light on top of those ugly white lights, by making the school system the reason people move here, the reason my parents moved here. Our schools are the first and best line of defense that this county has. When we educate children, we give them the tools and purpose that they need to be productive adults. And we're doing more for public safety than any other strategy when we educate people the right way, give them the supports that they need. When people feel hopeless and they don't see opportunity, that's when they do something that's wrong. I grew up as a low-income student in this county, the son of an immigrant. The opportunities I got from our schools and people related to our schools were immense. And I want the same for every kid in this county. This is not a budget that I would have written, but we did limit the damage to our schools and we honored our agreements with county workers. We didn't raise property taxes on working families, and we started doing the hard operational work that this moment demands. There was a way, we found it, and that's why I supported this budget. And there is no doubt more work to do to make sure all of our residents have what they need to thrive. And tomorrow, we'll get back to work. Thank you.
Thank you. The last person on my list is Councilmember Evan Glass.
Thank you very much, Madam President. This has been the most difficult budget I've experienced during my 2 terms on the council. And the process itself had moments of turbulence, but we buckled up and worked through it. Nobody got everything they wanted, and we had to take tough votes. We had to compromise, which is how the legislative process works. Leadership is about landing the plane, not walking away when it gets tough. Not grandstanding so it fits into a TV commercial or on a bumper sticker. I took an oath of office not to shirk my responsibility when I didn't like the outcome. And I think that the absolutist mentality that if you don't get 100% of everything you want, or that there's one thing you don't like that you're going to walk away, I don't think that's leadership. We see that type of purity politics and extremism in other places, and it should not be tolerated here in Montgomery County. We faced a very similar budget, a challenging one in 2023, when every member of this council voted for the final budget, which included a property tax increase. Now, not everyone liked that budget either, but everyone voted for it because passing the budget is the job we were elected to do. And we have real challenges here in Montgomery County, and those challenges are what local government is supposed to solve. And let me be clear, no Montgomery County department or agency received all the funding that they requested because we could not meet all of their needs. And those decisions were painful. Roughly 1/2 of our budget does go to MCPS, and we never should have been in the position of making these impossible trade-offs, particularly to save educators' jobs. And at the same time, we cannot keep rating the designated retiree healthcare costs, and we should not be using one-time funds for ongoing expenses. I didn't vote for that proposal because it's not fiscally sound. That's why I have repeatedly called for structural changes and more transparency in the MCPS budget process. Now, MCPS does need additional resources to meet the needs of our educators and our students. Absolutely. Which is why we are funding MCPS more than last year. But to fully fund MCPS's ongoing needs, we also have removed funding for much needed capital investments like HVAC replacement, leaking roof, and other structural issues that our teachers, our students, and our parents have been demanding. At the same time, the budget includes safeguards for our immigrant neighbors who are fearing for their safety, which is why we're adding funds to help them access rapid response services if, God forbid, ICE or any other federal agents come after them. It's a program that works, it's targeted, it's effective, and it's helping people in our community. We also have to help more vulnerable residents who are experiencing homelessness. The federal cuts by HUD means that there is not enough short-term housing or emergency shelters. And so we're funding them in this budget because we know emergency shelters work and it keeps families off the street as we work toward long-term solutions. And then I want to add that our nonprofit providers also need help. They are being asked to do more with less, increased requests for help and decreased federal funding, both driven by this federal government, which is why this budget delivers a much needed 3.5% inflationary increase for the organizations on the front lines of our community. It is not the 8% that they requested, but it's what we were able to provide for them so that they can continue providing critical services to our residents. So much of this budget has been focused on revenue, and we do need more revenue. But the only solution that has been offered by the county executive and some colleagues is to continue increasing property taxes, and that is not the solution. What we have to do is grow our economy and our tax base. We have to make it easier to open and operate businesses, which means streamlining our permitting and regulatory reform. And we also have to have more housing that's affordable so employers and their employees can actually live near where they work. That has to be the focus moving forward. And with regard to this budget, I did not support any of the tax increases or adjustments. My decision was not an ideological one. It was an understanding that our residents are already stretched thin and many cannot afford higher taxes. But a majority voted in support and they prevailed. And that vote established the revenues that we now have to work with throughout this budget. Montgomery County residents elected us to lead, not to walk away when the job gets tough. Because this work is complicated. It is nuanced. It is a $7.9 billion budget that defines us as a community. And that is what leadership requires. We have to fund our schools. We have to fund essential services. And we have to honor employee contracts and pay our hardworking staff. And that only happens when we approve a budget, even if it's an imperfect budget like the one we are approving today. I'm supporting this budget not because I agree with everything in it, but because it invests in our county's future and protects our communities and families. That's what leadership is, and that's what this moment calls for. I want to thank the council president and my colleagues who completed the assignment, which was approving a budget. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And I respect the process most of all. We got through it. And so I do want to thank council staff for working with us over these last 2 months, guiding us and providing us with all the information we requested. And I personally want to thank my office staff, who on top of the budget continue helping fill potholes, getting rental assistance, and calling Pepco when it's needed. Jill, Hope, Hannah, Chris, Jonathan, Avery, I appreciate their hard work, because this is hard work, and this is what we were elected to do. I yield back.
Thank you to everyone, especially those who are here, still hanging strong. And we'll be back on Thursday for the vote on the resolutions. We are adjourned right now. Thank you.